Hi everyone, welcome to KIN 335, Historical and Cultural Foundations of Sport and Kinesiology in America. My name is Asia, I am your instructor for this course. Here is my email listed. I have been part of the Cal State Long Beach community for a very long time, so as a student before I got married, so your email is kind of forever, and so this is why you'll see that my last name is Blevins on my email, full name Anastasia, but again, if you need anything, feel free to contact me there, or you can send me a message through Canvas if you have any questions or concerns about the class. Our office hours this semester are going to be Wednesdays from 12 to 3 in my office in KIN 17, so basically right in the middle of the building. If you go through the main front doors, you'll basically be right there. Just a little bit of background on myself. I got my Bachelor's of Science degree at UCLA in psychobiology. Really liked combining the ideas of biology with kind of the thought process behind movement, and so I went in to go get my master's degree here at Cal State Long Beach. And so that's what I did. I got my Master's of Science in Kinesiology with an emphasis in sport and exercise psych, and I have been here ever since. I love sports. I wouldn't be doing this job if I didn't love sports. I really like this class too because I think it offers a very different, unique perspective of sport that we don't get a lot in the kinesiology space. But I was a former aquatics athlete, so I swam and played water polo, and I'm a huge baseball and football fan, so if any of you want to talk shop, please come visit me in office hours. I like seeing students from my async classes because we don't really get to see each other ever. I also love to travel and love going to the gym, and then more professionally, some of my research interests really do kind of fall into this sociology space of kinesiology. So I look a lot at athlete objectification, which is basically how we value athletes by what they look like, not necessarily what they can do in sport or their performance in sport. I also am really interested in intersectionality, which is basically how our differing identities based on gender, ethnicity, nationality kind of create this very unique lens of the world, and specifically through sport. So I'm really interested in how that intersectionality differs between people. That being said, I'm also very interested in more of the practical applications of how sport can be utilized to teach anti-racism interventions, and very much more recently interested in weight bias. So all these different identity points and really kind of fueling my passions in this space. So again, that's a little bit about myself. But again, you're going to be seeing me every week in our weekly video lectures. But again, feel free to come by to office hours, send me an email. I'd love to get to know you all a bit better. That being said, this is an asynchronous class, and so we'll never meet in person every week. Obviously, you're going to be seeing me every single week with my video lectures. But again, feel free to come to office hours, send me emails if you have any questions or just kind of want to get to know each other a bit better. That being said, our Canvas page is going to be our BFF. We have everything that you'll ever need for your success in this class on our Canvas page, including the syllabus, lecture, videos, lecture slides, assignments, rubrics, and your grades. That being said, please keep track of your own grades. This is an asynchronous class, and so I will kind of have more of a hands-off policy just because I understand that a lot of you are all busy, you have very flexible, differing schedules, and so please let me know if there's an error. Feel free to, again, come to office hours, contact me via email. More than willing to talk through if you have any questions, comments, or concerns about your grades as the semester progresses. That being said, due dates are not adjustable. I like to provide all of my asynchronous classes with everything day one so that they can prepare and kind of plan their schedule moving forward. That being said, please email me if you have any anticipatory conflicts. I know that, again, some of us taking asynchronous classes might be traveling the nation right now doing various things. And so if there's something that you know is going to conflict with maybe a due date for a paper, please let me know ahead of time so that we can make those adjustments. Additionally, I also recognize that with an asynchronous class, stuff happens. I mean, with or without an asynchronous class. And so I have a 24-hour no questions asked policy on any late papers. This only extends to papers. That being said, if you turn in your paper up to 24 hours after the official due date, I'm not going to penalize you for it being late. But if I don't hear from you after those 24 hours, I will be deducting 50%. And then if I don't hear from you for 48 hours after that due date, papers will no longer be accepted. But again, please keep in contact with me. I'm more than willing to be flexible to your schedule while still expecting you to have a lot lot of learning from this course. And like I said, this policy only applies to our papers, not our quizzes, exams, or any movie project deadlines, which we'll get into in a second. If you do reach out to me via email, I do try to respond to emails within 24 hours, but if you don't hear from me within 2 working days, please send me a follow-up email. Come to office hours. Sometimes things get lost in the shuffle, so please continue to reach out to me if you have any questions. PowerPoint and lecture videos will be available releasing Monday at midnight, so you have the entire work week to watch the videos, review the slides, look at the documentaries, and do your assigned readings before your quizzes due Fridays at midnight. So you have an entire work week to get all those things done. That being said, a lot of your quizzes that are going to be due on Friday will entirely pretty much come from my lecturing. I understand the book, as you're probably learning about or seeing, is extremely dense. I like the details, but it's important to recognize that, again, we got to take away the general themes of this class. And so that's really what I focus on in these quizzes is, information from my lecturing, not necessarily strictly from the readings itself. That being said, the book is a really good resource if there's anything that maybe is unclear in my teaching or things that you maybe want more details about. So that's why it is a required book for this class. Additionally, review the AI policy on the syllabus, just something that I've updated for this class. In the changing times, it's important for you all to be familiar with my expectations with AI in this course. That being said, this is a lot of information, but all these things to say, please familiarize yourself with our class calendar. This is going to be the most essential aspect for your success in this class. It's located at the end of the syllabus. We're going to go through it a little bit today and really follow those deadlines very closely. I do, again, kind of applaud myself by giving you everything today, day one, so that you're able to plan for the next 16 weeks. But again, this includes our due dates for our weekly quizzes, our exams, our papers, and movie project. The due dates are not adjustable, but please contact me with any anticipatory concerns. And so these are some of our course outcomes, but all this to say we're going to be learning about a lot of really cool, unique things in American sporting history, all the way from the colonial period to today, 2026. And so there's going to be a lot of evaluations and reflections on how race and ethnicity was represented in our histories, of how gender and access to sport has changed, and how nationality and war influenced our access to sport. And so we're going to see a lot of different, really interesting things in this class. But again, familiarize yourself with the course outcomes if you feel so inclined. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a class that requires a textbook, so I included both of the editions here. So we have the second edition in brown and then the third edition in this kind of like black and white. Pretty much the same, more or less the same content, except I do really teach from the second edition just because I feel like it's a bit more informative. The third edition kind of cuts out some details that I think is really enriching to our understanding of American sport history. That being said, I think the bookstore only provides you with the third edition, so that's fine if you get the third edition. But keep in mind that I do teach from the second edition in their detail as well as their pacing of the book. You're going to find that between the second and third edition, the chapter numbers and the chapter eras are a little bit different. So if you do get the third edition, just make sure that you're keeping pace with the decades and the content of the second edition, even if you're learning from the third edition. But like I said, everything that I'm going to be testing you on comes from my lectures, but as a supplementary additive to this class, please feel free to use any of these editions, just not the first edition, because this gets really outdated really quickly. We also have an optional textbook kind of tying into the more modern day ramifications of what we're going to learn in this class, because again, this is a history class, but history by itself is best served when we kind of reflect on how it impacts the now. And so, yes, this is a history class, but we are going to be looking at it within the context of American culture today. And so our required textbook is about this historical reflection. The Edson optional textbook is really about those modern day ramifications of what we learn about in history. So to make it easier for you for financial reasons, I have uploaded the required or the assigned chapters from the Edson text in our Canvas page. But again, if this is a really interesting topic for you, I highly recommend buying it for your own personal collection. It's a really cool way to kind of reflect and think about sports in a different way, with a lot more, again, historical and scientific foundation behind what we can kind of see and absorb in sport. We also have weekly documentaries and videos. I am a very visual learner, so I want to give you all visual aids to what we're learning about as well. Sometimes these documentaries are about more of the historical aspects of sport. Other times they're much more about the modern day ramifications of what we're learning about that week. But again, feel free to follow the links on the syllabus, and you will need to watch these on your own because they will be on the quizzes. Again, I think they're an important addition to what we are talking about from the text from our lectures. So again, please plan to have both the documentary videos and my lecture videos kind of in your class plan for each week. These are some of the videos that we will be watching. Again, anything from not just a game, we're actually going to come back to this quite a lot, but we're also going to talk about the Chavez Ravine, Little Big Man. But again, this is just an overview of things that you have looking forward to in this class. That being said, I kind of want to set this as a precursor and expectation going forward that, again, we're going to be learning a lot about really sensitive history and culture in the United States of sport. We're going to be covering a lot of sensitive topics, not limited to race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, disability, exploitation, and various types of abuse that has happened in our American sporting history. And so if any of these topics are a personal concern to you, you're more than welcome to express these concerns to me privately. But I do want that to be an expectation that we are going to be learning and discussing sensitive content within the context of American sporting history. That being said, this is an overview of our assignments and grading. So like I mentioned earlier, every single week you will be having a weekly quiz, basically just a checkpoint for me and for you to kind of think holistically about what you've been assigned from the week, leading up to this quiz. We also have 3 reflection papers, 1 movie project, 1 midterm, and 1 final. This is a straight scale grading class, as you can see here. And there just is kind of again, expectation going forward. There's not going to be any curves applied to this course, no rounding, no extra credit besides the extra credit opportunities that I'll be discussing with you today. And requests for these things will not receive a response once May comes around. Please do not request these things, as the semester ends. If you have concerns with your grade, please reach out to me as soon as possible. We can make a plan going forward because I really do want you to enjoy and succeed in this class. And so let me very briefly go over what these various assignments are. The first one are these weekly quizzes. Like I said, you're expected to keep up with the readings, lectures, and documentaries each week as they're assigned. Again, all of these assignments are in our syllabus already. These expectations are kind of set for you today so that you can plan for the rest of the semester. These quizzes are designed to assess your learning each week and allow for your personal reflection of the material. And so it may include content from lecture and the documentaries. So please plan to watch both of these things before you attempt the quiz. The quizzes each week kind of follow the same exact format in which there's going to be 3 multiple choice questions to assess your understanding with the material, and it's kind of a precursor to kind of what the final and midterm will look like. And then there will also be 2 free response questions to assess your application of the material, asking your perspectives, your opinions about things that we've learned, and that really kind of helps you with the expectations of the papers. And so because the content differs from week to week, I don't necessarily have a specific grading criteria of what I'm looking for in these free response questions, but I should be able to reasonably gather that you understand the material, that you've watched the videos, understand the material, and you're able to think critically about this material. I should be able to at least gather from 3 to 4 sentences as a response to these questions that you understand, and you're able to apply these topics to varying perspectives. Like I mentioned earlier, the quizzes are released Mondays at midnight, as is the lecture videos and the lecture slides. And then the quizzes are due Fridays at midnight. So when I mentioned before, the 24-hour late period only applies to papers. This is the expectation for the weekly quizzes. You have an entire week to do them. They're found under Canvas, under quizzes, and again, they are due within that school week. Please let me know if you have any questions about this, but this is something that you have every single week to kind of keep up with the content. Then 3 times in the semester, we have reflection papers in which you're going to be selecting a prompt, basically talking about one of the 4 things that we've discussed in the previous 4 weeks. Papers must be at least 3 pages long and are graded to which you're actively reflecting and responding appropriately to your self-selected prompt. And again, the prompts, very similarly to what I've discussed earlier, are going to be available on the previous Friday with the papers due the following Friday. Basically, you have 1 week to write each paper. And the reason why I only have you have access to the prompts for 1 week is because some of the prompts are kind of led into at the kind of the, not to say the last second, but I want you to have as much time as possible to absorb and understand the content before you have to think critically about it for these reflection papers. And so they are very much centered around the content that we talk about within the previous 4 weeks. But if you have any questions or concerns about the timeline of this, please let me know and we can make accommodations. The rubric is on Canvas. You're going to be uploading papers to Canvas under assignments, and the papers are going to be due on these dates. So we have our very first one due February 27th, the second paper due April 10th, the week after spring break. You're welcome to turn it in during spring break, but I didn't want to give you any assignments during that time if you really wanted it to be about rest and recovery. And then we have our final paper due May 1st. And so again, these are the due dates going forward. The only time that our 24-hour grace period is extended is with these papers. But again, if you have any questions or concerns, just feel free to reach out to me. We also have our movie project, and so this is kind of one of the ways in which I want you all to really collaborate with one another, because again, this is an asynchronous class. We're not meeting every single week at the same time, but I still wanted you to feel like you had community and you could lean on each other for the purposes of this class. And so as part of a group that I will be creating for you, you're going to be taking a sports movie, either fiction or nonfiction, and create a PowerPoint presentation that meets all these different criteria. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to summarize the movie. And so you're going to, again, review the main plot points of whatever movie that you choose. The example that I like to use for these classes is Remember the Titans, just because I think that it's a very historically rich and sociologically founded movie that I'm going to discuss in a second. So the first thing you're going to do is, again, summarize the movie, main plot points, main characters, again, relatively superficial, but it allows for folks who maybe haven't seen the movie to have a good understanding of what that movie is and what happens. The second thing you're going to do is you're going to explore the historical context in which the movie was set. Not when the movie was released, but when the movie was set. So again, Remember the Titans took place in 1971. So I want you to talk about what the US or even world history and sports history was like in the 1970s. And again, this is entirely dependent on what movie you select. But because this is a history of sports class, I really want you to dig deep into what the historical foundation was for this instance in sports. And again, if you have a nonfiction or a movie that's based on a true story, this might be a little bit easier, but you're more than welcome to do a fictional sports movie. It just might be a bit more challenging for you to really find when that movie was supposed to be taking place and how that can be, again, more accurately reflected in the history of our American sporting culture. The third thing you're going to do is you're going to investigate the validity of the movie to actual sports history and culture. So again, you're talking about what happened during when the movie was set, and then you're going to reflect on if this movie actually was real during the time it was set, would this have been an accurate or true valid reflection of what the values, what the historical instances would have been if that movie was set actually during that place. And so, in talking about my example, was Remember the Titans an accurate representation of what sports was like in the 1970s in the South for Black and white athletes and coaches? Because this movie was based on a true story, is Remember the Titans an accurate portrayal of what really happened, right? So this little subsection is a little bit easier maybe to talk about if it was based on a nonfiction or if it was based on a true story, that you're actually able to see, okay, this is the movie, this is what happened in real life. Are those two things similar or not? If it wasn't a true story, or if it was a fictional movie, would it have at least been realistic if those things happened in the time that it was placed? Again, this is a historical class, so it's important for you to really kind of reflect and think about the accuracy in which our movies are presented to us within the greater context of American sporting history. The fourth thing you're going to do is you're going to relate the sports movie to at least 3 different topics covered in class. Again, it can be anything from talking about the historical significance of, and for my example, Remember the Titans, it can be talking about the historical significance of black and white athletes playing sports together. So you can talk about integration, issues of hypermasculinity, which is something that we're going to talk about a lot in this class, sport and sexuality. Depending on your movie, you can also be talking about gender and representations of sport with gender, nationality, ethnicity, just varying things that we've talked about, more the sociological component to our history class. And then finally, you're going to be concluding with an interactive discussion about how the movie impacted your group. And so for the previous 4 points above, these don't necessarily have to be done together. I mean, you can delegate, which individual does what part of the project, but for the point of criteria 5, this does have to be collaborative because I really want this to be a discussion about your personal experiences with this project. I want you to kind of maybe talk about what this experience was like. How does it feel to look at sports movies in this more historically explorative way? We could talk about how much power movies really give to our collective, and is this power really serving minoritized communities, or is it kind of perpetuating stereotypes? And so, I mean, there's a lot of different things that you can talk about. You can also talk more about movie-specific discussion points. But like I said, this has to be done collectively. This is kind of the only true synchronous part of this entire class, this entire project. And it should really function as a conversation. And so again, the modality that you do this is completely up to you. I've had students do Zoom meetings with each other, so it's all kind of recorded on their laptops. I've also had students do like an in-person recording, so they're all meeting as a group live. They have the phone or the camera set up on one side and they're able to kind of have that exchange together. But again, this should function as a discussion and not necessarily kind of a collection of disjointed opinions. It should kind of be more ebb and flow collaborative with one another. But again, let me know if you have any questions about this. As kind of more of the expectations of the formatting, it must be at least 10 slides long, accompanied by visuals and or videos. It must include a slide with your resources as kind of a reference slide, and this is not included in the 10 slide minimum, but again, if you're kind of adhering to all the different points, 10 slides will be relatively easy for you to hit. It must be at least 10 minutes long. The embedded videos that you can put in your slides, which I'll get to in a second, don't necessarily count towards the time minimum requirement. But again, 10 minutes is going to go by really quickly if you're adhering to all 5 of these points. Group mates must speak for about an equal amount of time, and you must record yourselves presenting both visually and auditorily, meaning you have to have your camera on, or again, have your camera set up so that I'm able to see you and hear you as you're presenting this presentation. The presentation is worth 30 points, and the points break down as follows. Again, 25 points. Most of the grading will come from your ability to appropriately address the 5 criteria in the previous slide. 5 points is graded for more of these 4. This is one of the projects that does offer extra credit. And so again, I want to make this as fun as possible for you all too. So extra credit points are given to students who dress up or use props to kind of reflect their movies. And this must be explicitly identified while you're presenting, or at least like after the fact, just because I don't want to assume that if you're wearing a jersey, that it's not just you wearing a jersey and it's actually you as, representing your movie that you're talking about. So again, feel free to enjoy it, have fun, dress up, and extra credit points will be given for that. There are some deadlines that I want you to keep in mind. So the very first one is going to be March 27th. This is another opportunity for extra credit, basically just as a way for you all to kind of plan throughout the semester, and also as a reward for you to not wait until the last minute for this project. And so extra credit. So to get some extra credit for this, please send me an email with the proof of your group meeting. Again, either in person, or this can be like a screenshot of a Zoom or a FaceTime, Discord as well. Please email me the movie that you'd like to present and a basic plan of action, including who's responsible for what, when you plan to record the presentation, do the stuff, and that's basically all I need. But again, this is kind of a reward for you all to, again, meet early. Feel free to lean on each other for studying or anything else that you need. But again, March 27th is going to be the deadline for that. We also have April 24th. So if you don't take advantage of this extra credit plan, you must at least email me the movie that you want on a first come, first served basis. I will also be posting the movies that people select on our Canvas page. So when you do email me, double check that before you send me the movie that you want, just because groups can't be doing the same movie. So that being said, that's our deadline for April 24th. And then finally, this whole project is due May 8th, in which you're going to upload your video in MP4 format to Canvas under the assignments section. You can also upload your PowerPoint slides as well, but all I need bare minimum is an MP4 that includes both video and audio of you all doing this presentation. And so this is just a couple of examples of some of the movies that you can do. Some of the movies that I'm sure you've seen or not seen, very popular sports movies. And like I said, I'm going to very briefly switch over to show you all what this example PowerPoint project would be if I were to do Remember the Titans. That being said, you can't do Remember the Titans because I did this project for you all here. Okay, so this would be, the title page, PowerPoint presentation, my name. You're more than welcome to the trailer. This doesn't replace your summary or the necessary requirements of the summary, but you're more than welcome to play the trailer. This doesn't count towards your 10 minutes of recording either, but again, this is a visual for people who maybe haven't seen the movie so that they're able to understand what this movie is.
Why are you smiling?
Anyway, for the sake of time, we'll just skip over that. But again, movie summary, basic plot points, main characters, who they are, kind of the main conflicts of the movie, couple slides, some visuals there. And again, talking about really what this movie was about. Then again, you get into the second point, which is historical context. Again, this is a history class, so really kind of feel free to dig deep in this. Again, the historical context of what this movie is about, what happened kind of leading up to the 1970s as to why this is such an impactful movie too. So again, the historical context of, the struggle of representation in the sporting space, but also within American society based on race. Then we also talk about the historical context of sports. So again, the 1970s as a general kind of theme or a general, again, historical background, but also really why this was such a tumultuous time in American sporting history. And then you can talk about a couple of notable athletes if you want as well. The third point, you have the validity of the movie. Again, this is based on a true story. So this was really helpful for me to kind of see how the movie was accurate or not in reflecting what actually happened in sporting history. More often than not, you're going to find that movies kind of Disneyfy themselves, in which they're very dramatized. They kind of maybe omit some key details, but that would be the point of this part of the assignment, is to tell me about what they did that was different than maybe would have happened in reality. And then again, if you pick a fiction movie, just talk about if you feel like it would have been accurate or reflective of what sport was like during that time in which the movie was set. This is just a couple of different topics. This is kind of how I went about reflecting or talking about these different topics. So I talk about, various topics. If you've seen the movie, racism is arguably the biggest theme of this movie. And so what I did is I talked about racism within our context of class and then how we see racism within the movie. So again, talking about it within the context of class, how we see it in the movie. You can have a video here. And then again, examples of how we've seen it in class. Second topic, homophobia. We talk about how we see homophobia in the movie, and then the scene in which they talk about, or that I mentioned. But again, for the sake of time, we'll move forward and then see how we talk about homophobia within the context of sporting history. We also talk about stacking, which kind of goes into racism and just kind of representations of different racial groups and positions in different sports. Actually started first by talking about how we see it in class, and then how we talk about it within the context of the movie. So again, basically just kind of what are some of the sociological implications of this movie? How do we see it in class? And then how do we see it within the movie? These could be discussion questions that I would have with my group mates, again, kind of leading into what I thought about the experience of watching a movie like this. Do you think that football still has race issues? Why or why not? And all these different things. And then my final slide is a reference slide. And kind of this is all I really need just to show that I got some of my outside sources, give credit to those who did it. I really only need a hyperlink. I don't need a whole APA citation for this project, but just show me that you did get information from other places, that being lecture, the book, or just other websites. So again, that's kind of an example. This is also uploaded to Canvas to you for you to refer back to as often as you need. Okay, so That being said, there's going to be a lot of moving around within the next couple of weeks of the semester, so I will only be assigning groups after the withdrawal deadline. And again, these are going to be randomly created, and I'm going to be creating an email with all of your group mates. Please continue to reach out to them in a new email chain. I don't want to be in that email chain as you're planning stuff. Additionally, I'll also make a Canvas announcements with everyone's group, so please keep a lookout for your emails. Make sure that you have access to Canvas and you're able to reach out to each other. And again, if you don't see yourself in a group or if you don't get an email from me by February 6th, please reach out to me because I want you to have as much time as possible to plan, discuss, and do things with your group for this project. We also have a midterm and a final. The midterm is going to be covering weeks material from weeks 2 to 7. It's 30 multiple choice questions, true, false, matching. There are no writing questions, but it's closed note, closed book, and you'll only have 45 minutes to take it. This is in direct contrast to the quizzes where it's an unlimited time. This is really only for understanding the content, and so that's why that there is a time limit on this. If you do have accommodations from BMAC, please let me know as soon as possible so that I can make those accommodations as necessary. We do have a study guide for the midterm that will be released on March 7th. The midterm, very similarly to our quizzes, is going to be available for an entire school week, so it's going to be released on March 9th at midnight, and it's due March 13th at midnight, so you have those full 5 days to study, ask questions, come to office hours, and then take that by Friday. There's no makeup exams or taking exams early. Again, you know today what my expectations are and when this exam is due, so please plan accordingly. Very similarly, we have our final, which is non-cumulative, so this covers materials from weeks 9 to 15. Again, similar format, 30 multiple choice questions, closed note, closed book, only 45 minutes to take it. The study guide for the final will be released on May 2nd. You'll have access to the final from May 4th to May 8th, so that Monday to Friday. And again, same thing, no makeup exams, but please let me know if you anticipate any conflicts or if things come up. We also finally have our last extra credit opportunity in this class. This is something new that I've done. I've never done this before, so I'm excited to see, hopefully some of you take advantage of this opportunity to earn extra credit. But basically, I want you to do an extra credit postcard. And so this is allowing you to kind of reflect and think about American sports history in a creative way, in which you're going to be designing a postcard that either features a person or event of significance from class. It can be someone from the book that maybe we didn't cover or someone from lecture. And basically what I want this postcard to look like is, the front of the postcard should be visually appealing, like as you see here for some of these examples. And the postcard would have a tagline, greetings from, and insert your chosen person or event from history. Greetings from, the 1919 Black Sox scandal. Greetings from Jackie Robinson. I'm just thinking baseball. Baseball's on the mind right now. But basically, I want the front of the postcard to be very aesthetically pleasing, but also show what you're going to be talking about on the back side. So the back of the postcard should more or less look like a postcard itself. I mean, you can have all the to, from, place for a stamp, but I also want you to include a brief 3 to 5 sentence summary of that chosen person or event's significance to American sporting history. And again, talk to me about it in your own words as how you understand it. And basically how I'm going to grade this is, is it aesthetically pleasing? Is your reflection accurate of what actually happened in sporting history from that person or that event? And again, please have fun with this. This is the first time I've offered this, so I want you to kind of just enjoy it for what it is. And I really look forward to seeing all that you come up with. You're more than welcome to take inspiration from Canva. This is just a screenshot of the hyperlink that I've included here and on the syllabus. There are free options for you to kind of base your postcard on. So again, feel free to search up images online, import it to the postcard, be creative with it. This is really kind of up to you and how you want to go about doing it. But again, make sure that it's aesthetically pleasing on the front and make sure that you have an accurate representation and summary of what you've chosen on the back side. That being said, if you do utilize Canva, don't pay for a template. I mean, there's so many free options, so make sure that you choose the template that doesn't have crowns on the bottom right corner, because if it's a crown, that means it's premium, you have to pay for it. I don't want you to have to pay for stuff. You don't have to use Canva. You can also use, whatever medium that you choose, just as long as it has kind of two components that look similar to what a postcard would look like. Please download whatever image that you choose as a PDF, upload it to Canvas, and submit it to Canvas by May 8th. This is kind of our last day of class. just so that you have as much time as possible to plan, learn, and kind of pick maybe your favorite event or person of significance in this class. Please review the syllabus for all these university policies. Feel free to scan this QR code. This is kind of our beach wellness code. So if any of you have concerns maybe with housing, with food, with tutoring opportunities, this is a one-stop shop for all of those resources available for you. That being said, here's our calendar for the semester for weeks 2 through 7. This is our midterm content, basically covering content from the 1400s all the way to the 1900s. So 500 years of sport. There's going to be a lot of maybe more antiquated reflections of sport, but again, stuff that is very significant to our foundation of why sport is so powerful in the United States is kind of what we discover here. And then for our final content from weeks 9 to 15 is from 1900 to 2026. So about, 126 years of sport here. Much more modern, maybe much more recognizable to sports today. But again, setting that foundation for the commercialized aspect of sport, the materialism that we see in sport today really kind of formed during these couple, 126 years. And that being said, that's kind of the overview of our syllabus. Please let me know if you have any questions about that. This was our very first assigned reading. If you didn't get to it, that's totally fine. We're going to go over it together. But really just kind of a foundational element as to why we talk about this class as kind of a more historical and sociological reflection of sport. And this idea that, again, sport kind of acts as a microcosm of society. The idea that it's a very small scale representation for a lot of other things that are happening in our wider American collective. And so we talk about issues of racism, we talk about issues of gender, nationality in a small scale with sport, but you can also maybe extrapolate a lot of those similar understandings to things that are much more generalizable or greater than sport. And so sport is really digestible for larger, more maybe impactful things. And so when we talk about this kind of reflection of society, it's also important to acknowledge that sport in America isn't merely passive. Yes, we're going to see many examples of how sport is representative of society and how people who play sport, people who have access to sport, might be reflective of who has access to American society as a general maybe implication, but it's not merely passive all the time. It's also utilized as a medium for change, that there are many instances that we've had in history in which sport itself is used as a medium to kind of challenge the status quo. Just as some examples in more recent history, BLM in 2020. But we also had the athletic revolution in the 1970s. We also utilized sport at the turn of the 20th century to kind of challenge gender norms. And so sport is both reflective and causational of these American values. And so you're going to see this endless cycle many times throughout the scope of this class. But throughout this cycle, we still see things that are very reflective and pervasive throughout time, that there are some common characteristics between sport and society that have really stood the test of time within our American reflection of our histories and our values. One of them is this high degree of competitivism, that we kind of pride ourselves of being a society where we demand winners. And if you're not a winner, then you're a loser. We are taught these things in sport. It could be extrapolated into, we also teach these things in our American general society, this collective, this idea that we demand winners, that we have to be the best, that we are improving ourselves all the time. This grind set is very pervasive in many spaces in and out of sport. We also see a high emphasis in materialism and kind of this idea that, again, with this competitiveness, with this winningness, we often have this kind of materialistic reward system for that winner. The idea that we have some of the highest paid people on the planet are professional athletes. And so this idea of really kind of marrying the idea of winning, going along with power that comes with materialism, with financial power and influence. We also see, as we're going to see in this class, a pervasivism, of racism, of sexism, ableism, ageism, classism, that with this competitiveness, with this winner mentality, there's this stratification of access, that people might not have sporting opportunities compared to someone else based on these identity points. And again, this is something that we've seen since the 1400s to today. Yes, it's ebbed and flowed, it's changed in its representations, but we still see this hierarchy based on identities in and out of sport. And then finally, this idea that sport is not a sanctuary. Deviance is found throughout sport. And it's kind of one of those points of reflective hypocrisy, the idea that we think of sport as a fair and just place, that sport has rules, sport has expectations of character, of development. But for every time that we teach our athletes and people to behave a certain way in sports, they often do the exact opposite and even more so. That cheating is rampant, violence is rampant. And again, a lot of that is really encouraged by this high degree of competitiveness, this idea that we expect winners no matter what it takes to win. And so sport is not a sanctuary. We're going to see many ways in which sport is a very powerful system to challenge the status quo in many ways, but also challenge this idea that sport doesn't necessarily create honest people, that athletes themselves are kind of encouraged to win with, whatever means necessary. And we see this in many instances throughout our sporting history. And so all this to say, while sport is a microcosm of American society on our values, on our expectations and access, it's not just passive reflection. It can be an agent of change, in which we're going to see many instances throughout history in which sport as a medium has been used to change these values and how it kind of represents itself today. And so I love this quote by Dave Zirin. We're going to see Dave Zirin. He's a sports sociologist in our Not Just a Game documentary. But he has a quote that kind of really represents these tenets well, that sport has often acted as a reflection of the national life. At different times, it has also been a fetter, holding back the tide of change. In other instances, it has been a taser, sending an electric jolt into the body politic, acknowledging that sport is very powerful in the sense that it can be reflective of these values, but it can also be utilized to change the status quo and what these values are. And so again, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. Come to office hours. I'd love to get to know you all better in this asynchronous modality. I'm really looking forward to a great class. And next week we start right away at colonial period from the 1400s to 1750. Hope you all have a wonderful week back at the beach, and hopefully I'll see you soon. Bye.